We're going to hear Diane play Canticle 13, Song of Praise. The words are found on page 90 in the Book of Common Prayer. Go ahead, Diane. Thank you, Diane. This is time for the sermon. So I will go ahead and deliver you my words and thoughts on today's scriptures. How do you know when God is calling you? How do we know that it's God and not just wishful thinking or the sound of our own desires and needs? What does God's voice sound like? Is it harsh, like a scolding parent, or does God speak in words and feelings? So how do you know when God is speaking to you? Young Samuel in the temple did not know that God was speaking to him, and Nathanael scoffed at the idea that he was about to meet the Messiah. How many times have we missed the voice of God? Maybe you have friends who'll tell you that they've heard God speaking to them, or they've had an unusual experience where they somehow knew that the ideas popping into their heads were the voice of God. And maybe you've wondered about their faith stories. Maybe you long for that kind of experience. Or maybe you're facing a tough decision and you're not sure how to make the right choice. Maybe you're fighting an inner battle with yourself over painful memories of a past experience that seem to hold you captive, or at least seem to want to define you. Or maybe you're at the brink of a change in your life. Perhaps they're young people you know getting ready to go to college, or thinking about getting married, or facing a challenging work environment, dealing with a family issue. My husband and I realized in the next 6 months, we're going to be buying a house and moving. First time we've ever bought a house in all of our married life. That's going to be quite a change. And maybe you long for some definitive direction. You long for the voice of God to cut through the impasse, to point the way, to illumine the future and make everything come out all right. Maybe you feel your faith is lacking if you can't say that you have heard the voice of God. And if you've ever felt this way, know that you are not alone. And your faith is not lacking. And be encouraged by the gospel stories, the reports of the good news in today's readings. For it's clear that Samuel and Nathanael are just like us. They heard the voice of God. And so have you. Each one of us has heard the voice of God, and maybe we just didn't know what to call it. Maybe we didn't recognize it. Maybe we were afraid. Samuel was very young. He was the miracle child of an older woman, Hannah, who thought for years that she was unable to have a baby. There was no help back then as there is now. Any woman who's longed for a child knows the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly longing and irrational sense of failure that accompanies them when they have trouble conceiving. Hannah prayed to God, and Eli, the high priest in the temple, watching her pray, thought she was drunk, and yet gave her hope when he realized that she was sincere. And when the great miracle of birth came to her, Hannah dedicated her son to God, taking him to the temple when he was very young to become a servant for Eli. Perhaps she remembered him from that day when she was praying so hard. Eli, so the story goes, was going blind, and Samuel was the one designated to help him day or night, to wait on him. And so one night, Samuel heard his name, and he thought Eli was calling. 3 times Eli sent him back to bed, but the last time Eli suggested that Samuel might be hearing the voice of God. And he suggested this reply, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Nathanael was a pious and faithful man, a son of Israel. His friend Philip had met Jesus, and in him saw a person compatible with greatness. Compatible, perhaps, even like, and yes, perhaps even more, the long-awaited Messiah. Nathanael was not terribly impressed. Can anything good come out of Nazareth or Martinsburg or Hancock or any of those areas that somehow people feel are out of the mainstream? But out of curiosity, he followed Philip and found that he himself had been found first, recognized. Nathanael, his name means gift from God. And in a clever play on words, Jesus tweaks and teases Nathanael by calling him an Israelite without guile. You need to know that before he was named Israel, the patriarch Jacob's name meant the deceitful one. But after wrestling with an angel, he was named Israel, the one who strives or wrestles with God. But how do we know that it's God speaking to us? When we know that God is calling us or giving us direction. C.S. Lewis is best known for his classic series of Narnia books. 4 children, brothers and sisters, are sent to live in the country during the Blitz of World War II. London. They're transported into a strange land by way of an enchanted wardrobe. They have many adventures, and they meet many strange creatures such as centaurs that are half human and half horse, and talking animals and trees, sentient beings of nature. Among their adventures, there's an underlying theme of good and evil, light and dark. Dark forces led by an evil witch or by strange gods are challenged and overcome as the children come to know Aslan, the great lion of Narnia. Aslan is, in the various books, the God figure, creating all things, the Christ figure, dying and rising, and the Holy Spirit figure, guiding and shaping. But the children are very much like us and cannot always see or recognize Aslan, even as they long for him to appear. In one of the lesser-known books of the series, called The Horse and His Boy, interesting title, not The Boy and His Horse, but The Horse and His Boy, A talking horse of Narnia has been captured and taken to another land. He pretends to be an ordinary non-talking horse, and in the process he meets a small boy who longs to escape his own slavery. And together they run away, and near the end of their escape, the young boy Shasta is lost. Listen to what happens. Shasta discovered that someone or somebody was walking beside him. The thing or person was going so quietly that he could hardly hear any footfalls. What he could hear was breathing. It was a horrible shock. The thing, unless it was a person, went on beside him. And just as he was becoming aware of it, there suddenly came a deep, rich sigh out of the darkness beside him. He felt the breath of that sigh on his chilly hand. "Who are you?" Shasta said, scarcely above a whisper. "The one who has waited long for you to speak," said the thing. "Are you a giant?" asked Shasta. "You might call me a giant," said the large voice, "but I am not like the creatures you call giants." "I can't see you at all," said Shasta. "You're not something dead, are you? Oh, please, please do go away." Once more he felt the warm breath of the thing on his hand and face. "There," it said, "that is not the breath of a ghost." "Who are you?" asked Shasta. "Myself," said the voice, very deep and low, so that the earth shook. And again, "Myself," loud and clear and gay. And then the third time, "Myself," whispered so softly you could hardly hear it, and yet it seemed to come from all around you. Shasta is revived and goes on to warn the people of Narnia of an impending invasion, and finds out in the process that he is the long-lost son of the king. Shasta's story of meeting Aslan, Christ, reminds us a bit of Samuel and Nathaniel, and all three are called toward tasks that help bring about God's purposes. Christianity is not a religion of ideas, but faith in a living person, an affirmation and relationship with Jesus Christ, who was born, crucified, rose from the dead, and is now still living in the church, in the lives of believers who minister in his name, present in the halls of Congress, in the hospice of the dying, in the tents of the homeless. We meet him all the time. Our God longs to reveal himself to us, to bring us to new epiphanies, new openings and understandings, new opportunities and new directions. So how do you know when God is speaking to you?